I remember the first time I noticed the lake at night. The water was black, swallowing the faint glow of my flashlight, reflecting only the pale shimmer of the moon. The air was thick with mist, curling around the trees like it had a life of its own. I had come here seeking silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes your own heartbeat feel too loud. My friends had left hours ago, leaving me alone by the campfire, the flames flickering weakly as the wind rustled through the pine needles. At first, it was just shapes at the edge of my vision, shadows that darted when I looked directly at them. But then the air seemed to hum, low and hollow, and I felt a weight like I wasn't supposed to be here. I whispered to myself, trying to shake it off, but the fog thickened and everything familiar melted into darkness. Something moved just beyond the firelight, a form both there and not there, and I froze, unable to look away. That's when I saw it. The lake was still tonight. A thin fog hovered over the water, curling around the trees like smoke. I had the cabin to myself. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, even when nothing moves. The lantern by the door flickered. Just a brief tremor of light. I thought it was the wick, but then it happened again, and again. The wind wasn't moving. Not even the slightest rustle of leaves. Shadows stretched across the wooden walls. Long, spindly things that seemed to lean closer with every flicker. At first I laughed quietly to myself. Just tricks, I whispered. I told myself the light was old, the cabin settling, the sort of thing you say when you're alone, and your brain wants company. Then the shapes, they started moving differently. Not like the light, not like the cabin. They twisted the wrong way, bent unnaturally. It felt playful at first, but it wasn't. I watched them mimic me. My arm lifted. They lifted in reverse. My head tilted. They tilted back. I froze. The air thickened around me. Every breath tasted of rust and cold water. I could hear my own pulse, echoing in the empty corners. I tried to look away, but the shadows followed, stubborn and precise. Even the faintest movement of mine mirrored back in reverse. I took a step toward the lantern. The shadows recoiled, then lunged. I swallowed hard. A whisper of panic brushed my lips. I couldn't see them clearly. The dim light warped everything. Walls leaned inward. Floorboards groaned like someone else walking behind me. I reached for the door, cold metal under my fingers, a slow, soft creak. But the door hadn't moved. I turned back. The shadows had grown taller, thin fingers brushing the ceiling, twisting, waiting. A sudden calm settled, like the world was holding its breath. The lake outside went silent. Even the fog seemed frozen. Then I saw it, my reflection, or what could have been mine. It stood in the corner, stretching impossibly, bending at angles I couldn't. Eyes, dark, unreadable, staring. I blinked. It blinked in reverse. I wanted to leave. Every step toward the door was heavy, as though the cabin itself resisted. I stopped mid-hallway. The lantern flickered again. Shadows paused, and the silence waited. The lake outside whispered faintly, a soft hum through the fog. I imagined it calling me, or warning me. I couldn't tell which. Finally, I sat on the floor. Back against the wall. I breathed slowly, feeling the weight in the air, the subtle press of unseen shapes. Time lost meaning. One long, drawn breath. Then another. I watched the shadows stretch once more. Not quite matching me now. Not quite. And somewhere between the flicker and the dark, I realized I was no longer alone. The fog was thick, clinging to my jacket and hair. The forest felt alive, yet quiet, as if holding its breath. Pines stretched high above me, their needles whispering with every gentle wind. I walked slowly. The earth was soft beneath my boots, damp with morning dew. Each step pressed a faint groan from the soil like a subtle reply. A distant rustle caught my ear. I paused. The trees remained still. No birds called, only the faint hum of the wind threading through the branches. I thought it was the wind. I always think it's the wind. But the whisper came again. Softer this time, almost like a sigh. It carried words I couldn't place. Or maybe I didn't want to. The fog thickened, turning shapes into shadows. One tree ahead looked like a figure, hunched and watching. I blinked. It shifted slightly. The branches swayed, but no breeze touched them. I moved faster, yet the whispers seemed to follow. Soft, deliberate, curling around my ears. Every time I turned, the path looked unfamiliar. The forest felt wider, though I hadn't strayed far. A branch snapped behind me. I froze, no one. Nothing moved. The fog swallowed it all, and still, the whispers lingered. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But then I heard it again. Closer now. A word or part of one, perhaps. Stay, or was it why? I couldn't tell. The ground was uneven, roots curling like fingers. I stumbled, and the whispering paused. Silence pressed in, heavy and expectant. I could feel eyes on me, though no one was there. The pines seemed endless, their trunks pale and sharp in the fog. Shadows pooled at their bases. Something moved just beyond the veil, a flicker. Gone before I could focus. My breath came out in short bursts. I could taste the damp wood in the air. Every sound was amplified. A falling pine cone, the scraping of a branch, a faint shuffling in the distance. Or maybe inside me. I stopped near a hollowed tree, its bark gnarled like a face frozen in a scream. The whispering circled me now, closer. Beneath my feet, perhaps, or inside my skull. I felt it brush against my skin, cold and fleeting. I wanted to call out. My voice felt trapped. The forest only listened. It had ears in the rustle of needles, in the soft shift of fog. And it waited. A low fog rolled in, denser than before. Shapes became impossible to name. Branches bent toward me as I passed. I imagined eyes, hundreds of them, glowing faintly in the mist. I told myself the forest was empty. The pines were silent observers, but the whispering persisted. Now I was certain it was words, or fragments of them, a language I almost recognized. The path curved sharply, though I had not noticed before. I could hear soft footsteps behind me, not my own. Slower than mine, patient, tracking. I tried to run, but my legs were sluggish, tangled in roots and mist. The whispering grew urgent, almost pleading, or warning. I couldn't tell which. Then silence. A pause so deep it rang in my ears. I stood, chest tight, straining. Nothing moved. The fog seemed to hold its breath along with me. A faint light shimmered through the trees. Not sunlight, not moonlight. Pale, shivering. It moved slightly, as though the forest itself exhaled it. I edged closer, each step careful. The whispers returned, almost gentle, almost guiding. The fog shifted around me, and I felt something brush my hand. A leaf, a shadow? I couldn't be sure. I turned. Stillness again. The forest had swallowed the sound of my own heartbeat. Only the whispers remained. Soft, winding around the trees, circling me. I didn't follow the light. I couldn't. I just stood and listened. The fog curled around my ankles. The pines leaned in, silent, patient, and the whispers lingered. I walked away slowly. Each step pulled me from the forest, but not entirely. The voice stayed, in my mind, in the pause between my breaths. At the edge of the clearing, I glanced back. The fog seemed to ripple, folding the trees in on themselves, and for a moment, I could swear one of the shadows looked back at me. Then it was gone. The whispers followed me home. Soft, unbroken. Even as I lay in bed, the faint rustle of pines haunted the edges of sleep. I didn't know if they were words, or just the memory of them. Either way, they were still there. The air was heavy tonight. Fog lingered low over the lake, curling along the shore like pale fingers. I had walked here alone, boots sinking softly into wet grass. The moon hung thin and silver, its light scattered across the water, fragile and trembling. Every step I took left a silence behind me, almost reverent. I stopped at the edge. The surface was still, too still, holding a mirror of me. I knelt. My reflection stared back. At first it was normal. Then I saw it lag. My hands rose and the water delayed, shifting seconds behind me. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't move. But the ripples started anyway, curling outward, deliberate. Something below stirred. Not fish, not the wind. Something slower, more deliberate. My breath hitched, mingling with the soft hum of water moving against itself. I touched the surface lightly. The reflection mimicked me exactly, but it hesitated, as if weighing my touch. I pulled my hand back. The water stayed still. Too still. Shadows bent beneath the black surface, long and thin, like fingers brushing against the lake floor. I blinked, and they paused, freezing beneath the pale light. The air smelled of wet earth and something older, metallic. A faint rustling reached me from the reeds. I thought it was the wind. But the movement didn't match any breeze. I leaned closer. My reflection smiled. I hadn't smiled, I jerked back. The water stilled again, obedient. The silence pressed close, a weight I could almost touch. Soft footsteps, or something like them, circulated behind me. I didn't dare turn. Every instinct told me the wrong move could be noticed. The lake shifted, a whispering motion beneath the glassy surface. Dark shapes undulated, not random, not chaotic. They were learning, imitating, waiting. I stared at the reflection. It blinked when I didn't. It whispered, something I couldn't catch, low and wet. The fog thickened, curling around my shoulders, damp and suffocating. The reflection's lips moved again, clearer this time, silently forming words. I felt a nausea cold and creeping inside my chest. Something broke the stillness. A ripple traveled from the far edge of the lake, straight toward me. I hadn't moved. I hadn't touched anything. The water licked at the shoreline. It grew darker near my knees, as if shadows pooled from nowhere. I could see the outline of my own legs beneath the surface, and another set, wrongly long, twisted just slightly, mimicking my stance. I stumbled back, boots squelching in mud. The reflection stayed, perfectly poised. It raised a hand slowly. I froze. A soft hum filled the air. It wasn't in my ears. It vibrated through my chest, low and endless. The water trembled. I could see tiny circles forming, spreading across the surface like breathing. I held my breath. I wanted to run, but something kept me rooted. Curiosity or fear, perhaps both. The reflection lowered its head. I leaned forward, compelled. The surface remained glassy, then something shifted beneath. A shadow detached, sliding upward, smooth and dark. No legs, no arms, just presence. I felt my heart in my throat. A static sensation prickled along my skin, crawling. The shadow mirrored me, but not perfectly. Its smile was too wide. Its eyes too dark. I took a step back. The surface rippled again. The shadow paused, then followed in slow imitation. The reeds rustled. Something whispered from them, or was it the water? I couldn't tell. I knelt once more. Compelled by some gravity I couldn't name. The reflection leaned in closer, its face inches from mine, and then the water stilled. The shadow lingered, frozen. I saw beneath the surface a faint glow, pale and hungry. I touched the water again. The reflection flinched. The surface rippled violently, but the shape below stayed. It didn't belong to the reflection anymore. It was separate, aware, patient. The fog thickened, swallowing the moonlight. Everything felt muffled, distant, as if the world had gone underwater. The hum continued, low, vibrating under my ribs. I backed away slowly. The reflection remained, staring, not quite human. I didn't turn my back. I didn't want to see if it would leave the water. The lake sighed. Ripples cascaded softly, echoing in the silence. Something beneath watched, something waiting. I left my reflection behind. The water didn't follow, but I could feel it, beneath the surface, mimicking, always one heartbeat behind. The mist curled around my ankles as I walked away. And in the quiet, I could still hear the soft, wet hum of water, as if it remembered me. The air was damp. A chill rolled off the nearby lake, curling around my ankles. The fire crackled in front of me, pale sparks drifting up into the night. I could hear the trees breathing. Softly, slowly. Every so often, a branch tapped against another, like a hesitant knock. I settled closer to the flames. The logs smelled of resin and wet earth. I thought I was alone, but something shifted at the edge of my vision. It started as a flicker. A shadow, darker than the night itself, stretching across the ground. I frowned. The logs were burning evenly. There was no reason for a shadow to stretch like that. Then it moved, not naturally, not with the sway of my own limbs. It leaned, then stretched upward, mimicking gestures I didn't make. I froze. My breath stuck in my throat, small clouds vanishing into the night. I blinked, hoping it was the fire playing tricks. It wasn't. The shadow crouched as I crouched. It tilted its head as I tilted mine. A slow, deliberate mirror. I reached to toss another log onto the fire. The shadow rose taller. Its edges blurred like smoke or maybe fog. I could feel it pressing closer. Without sound, without shape, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just imagination. I told myself the woods played tricks at night. But when I blew out the flame, it grew. The fire hissed under my breath. Smoke coiled upward, curling around the shadow. It rose higher than the logs, taller than me. I stumbled back. Cold seeped into my fingers. Something unspoken brushed against the back of my neck. I tried to run my hand through my hair, reassure myself. The shadow copied me. Every flick, every twitch, my pulse drummed in my ears. I couldn't hear anything else. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. I bent down to smother the fire with dirt. The shadow arched, spined, stretching across the clearing. It moved faster than I could, slipping over logs and rocks with impossible grace. I realized then I couldn't fight it. Fire didn't scare it. Silence didn't scare it. Even my voice, muffled and trembling, seemed to only amuse it. I whispered my own name. It whispered back. A hush, hollow, just beneath the wind. I couldn't tell if it came from the shadow or from inside my own head. The logs groaned as the fire finally shrank. Smoke wrapped the clearing like a thin curtain. I thought maybe, finally, I could breathe. But the shadow lingered. It hovered, motionless. Then, in a slow slide, it drifted toward me. I stepped back. The dirt underfoot crumbled. The air smelled of wet ash and moss. I could feel its weight, pressing into my chest without touching me. I tried to run, but each step forward was mirrored. Every movement, every hesitation reflected perfectly. I looked down at my hands. They weren't alone. The shadow's fingers stretched beside mine, long, thin, too fluid. I spoke again. Nothing. I tried a whisper, a plea. It leaned in, closer, a breath colder than the lake water at midnight. I blinked, and it was gone, or maybe it wasn't. The darkness shifted in the corner of my eye, a movement too subtle to name. The night returned to quiet. The fire had died completely. I stayed crouched. Every sense stretched thin. The wind rustled through leaves, but nothing else moved. I imagined running. I imagined screaming. I imagined the shadow waiting, always waiting, somewhere beyond the trees. I could feel it behind me, though I knew the clearing was empty. I could feel it in the pause between my breaths. In the quiet thump of my heart, the moon broke through clouds. A pale light washed the clearing. Nothing. I touched the damp earth, tried to convince myself I was safe. But the chill clung to my skin, deeper than night, deeper than fear. I left the campfire behind. Every step I took, every crack of twig underfoot, felt mirrored. The woods were not mine anymore, and when I finally stopped, in the stillness I swore the shadows of the logs flickered. A figure lingered, just at the edge of light, watching, waiting. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I knew it would follow. Even now I feel it in the quiet, stretching, just beyond the corner of vision where the logs once burned, and maybe it always will. The fog had rolled in quietly, almost politely. I could see the edges of the trail fading, disappearing under its gray weight. My boots pressed against wet leaves. Each step sank slightly, muffled. The cabin was behind me. I knew it was there, though the haze made it seem smaller, distant, like a half-remembered dream. I stopped. A pause in the world. And then footsteps. Soft, measured, following. I moved again. So did they. Faster, slower. Every variation I made mirrored exactly. I held my breath. The fog swallowed sound, but I could hear them still. Shadows leaned between the trees. Branches curled down like pale hands reaching. I wanted to call out, but the fog made my voice feel heavy, sticky, wrong. The trail twisted. I remembered it vaguely through the haze. But the further I walked, the less certain I became. Something brushed against my arm. I froze. Nothing. The forest seemed to sigh. A deep, damp exhale through moss and stone. I tried to keep pace. The footsteps never faltered. Always just behind. I glanced sideways. Nothing. Yet I could feel eyes tracing the curve of my shoulder, the bend of my neck. The mist wrapped around me, colder now. I could see my breath, slow puffs, dissolving almost instantly. A bird squawked somewhere. It echoed too long, stretched unnaturally, like it was caught on the wind. The footsteps stopped. I stopped. They waited. I moved. They moved. The trail became uncertain. Twigs cracked under my own feet or someone else's. I could no longer tell. A rustling to the left. A movement too fast, too fluid. I blinked. Nothing. The fog shifted, curling in on itself. It made shapes, figures that weren't there. I thought I saw someone crouch behind a fallen log. But when I looked again, the log was empty. The forest leaned closer. Roots clawed at the soil like fingers. Shadows pooled around them. A soft footstep, different this time. Heavier, closer. I held my arms tight to my chest. Heart pounding, echoing against the fog. I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked the same. Gray and infinite. Branches snapped above me. A pale light flickered between them. Moonlight? Or something else? The footsteps matched me again. No hesitation. No sound except the echo of my own feet. I paused at a small clearing. The fog rolled over it in thick waves. I couldn't see more than 10 feet. A shadow moved just beyond my vision. I could feel it, more than see it. Waiting, patient, I wanted to run. But the forest seemed to stretch endlessly in front of me. I whispered my own name. It didn't come back. Only the quiet hum of the fog pressing in. The ground became softer. Moss and mud clung to my boots. I stumbled, almost fell. Behind me, a footstep. Not mine, not quite like mine. I froze. The air thickened, heavy in my lungs. The fog curled higher, hiding everything. Even the clearing vanished. Only gray and the sound of feet. I turned. Nothing but fog. Still, the rhythm continued. I started walking again. Left, right, twisting. The footsteps followed. The forest's breathing slowed, then stopped. An eerie pause, like the world was listening. I thought I could see the cabin now. Faint, dim, almost imaginary. I moved toward it. The footsteps stopped. All at once, silence pressed against me. Thick, wet, heavy. I swallowed. The fog shifted. A shape loomed ahead. Tall, thin, faceless. It didn't move, yet it didn't need to. I blinked, and it was gone. The trail opened into the small clearing by the cabin. Pale light from the windows flickered weakly through the fog. I reached the porch. Every muscle trembling. The fog pressed at the edges of vision, curling into corners, into shadows that weren't there moments before. Inside, the cabin smelled like wood smoke and damp. Safe or almost safe. I leaned against the door. Breathing heavy, shallow, I could hear it again. Footsteps, soft, echoing behind the cabin. I didn't turn. I didn't move. The fog crept closer. Around the cabin, past the walls, into the spaces I couldn't see. And then, slowly, quietly, it receded. Only the forest remained. Silent, watching, waiting. I stayed inside. Until the pale light of morning nudged the edges of the mist. Outside, everything seemed ordinary. Leaves, branches, the trail fading into nothing. But sometimes when I step outside, I feel the footsteps. And I stop. They stop too. And I realize I am never truly alone. The forest was quiet. Thick fog wrapped around the trunks, softening the edges of the world. I could hear only my own breathing, shallow, uneven. I stopped walking. 2 pale dots floated between the trees. They didn't move, but I felt them staring, heavy and unblinking. When I blinked, they were gone. Just empty darkness where they had been, but the chill crawling up my spine told me they hadn't left. The leaves rustled. Not with wind, but with something else. Something brushing against the shadows. I stepped forward. Branches scratched at my arms, snagging my jacket. The dots returned. Closer now, closer than before. I forced my eyes to follow them, but the fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet. Shadows stretched unnaturally, pulling toward me as if alive, a dry snap of a twig. I froze. The dots shifted. They hovered at the edge of my vision, pale and quiet. I dared not turn my head. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused. A soft hum entered the stillness. Not from me, not from the wind, but somewhere in the air itself. It wrapped around my chest and throat, pressing me down. I blinked again. The dots had moved closer. I could almost feel them on my skin. Shadows writhed around the base of the trees. Not quite solid, not quite empty. I could see faint outlines of limbs, stretching, reaching, I whispered, though I knew no one would hear. "Stay back." The words felt useless. The hum grew softer. Almost comforting, but when I looked up, the dots were at eye level now. A pause. The fog thickened. A cold breath grazed my neck. I turned my head slowly. Nothing. And yet the sense of being watched intensified. My pulse hammered in the silence. Every leaf, every branch seemed exaggerated, amplified in the muted night. Someone was moving just beyond my vision. The dots blinked in unison, then vanished. And the forest felt impossibly still, as though it had been holding its breath. I took a step forward. A shadow flickered along the edge of the trees. I didn't blink this time. I don't think it mattered. The path ahead disappeared into fog. The forest pressed in around me closer than it had before, and somewhere, deep in that quiet, I felt pale eyes following every hesitant step. The night waited, and I could not tell if it was patient or hungry. The cabin smelled of damp wood and old smoke. Outside, the wind folded the forest over itself, bending the pines in silent waves. It was late, later than I thought. The fire had shrunk to orange embers. I had placed the blanket over the armchair. It was thick, frayed at the edges, a forgotten remnant of someone else's warmth. I thought I'd feel comfort under it, but the air inside felt different. A faint shift caught my attention. The blanket quivered, like a ripple across still water. I held my breath. My own heartbeat seemed to echo against the walls. I told myself it was the wind. The cabin groaned as the old beams stretched. Still, the movement persisted. Soft, almost imperceptible, like fingertips brushing over wool. I leaned closer. The blanket rose, then sank. A sigh, long and shallow, pressed against my ears. I was alone. I told myself this again, though the voice sounded distant. Even my breathing seemed borrowed, as if borrowed air belonged to someone else. I reached for the blanket. It slipped under my fingers, trembling as if resisting touch. The air thickened, and the warmth I expected was absent. Outside, branches scraped the windows. Inside, the room held its own quiet rhythm. A shiver ran through the floorboards. The blanket moved again. Not by the draft, not by me. It lifted like a living thing, gentle and deliberate. I stepped back. My shadow stretched across the room. There was no one there. Only the hum of the cold cabin and the slow brushing motion on the chair. I whispered to the empty air. Nothing answered, yet the sound of my own voice felt intrusive. The blanket stilled for a heartbeat, then a soft inhale, shallow and careful. I froze. The sound came from beneath the folds. I could almost see the shape, hidden, shifting softly beneath the fabric. My fingers tingled. My throat tightened. I wanted to pull the blanket completely, but hesitation anchored me in place. The air grew thicker, and my ears filled with muted rustling. It was not wind. It was deliberate, slow like something breathing itself into the room. I watched. The blanket rose again, this time higher, like it carried the weight of a small body. The edges fluttered, brushing against the floorboards with soft friction. The ember light flickered, and the shadows leapt across the walls. I blinked. The blanket was no longer on the chair. It shifted across the floor, silent, floating as if guided by unseen fingers. I wanted to leave. My feet refused. Every nerve screamed, yet I stayed rooted, listening. A whisper of movement, then silence so deep it filled the cabin entirely. A breath escaped from the blanket. Not mine. Not human, though human enough to unsettle. I couldn't place it. Too close, too far, wrapped in the wool and memory. I spoke softly. My words felt wrong. "Who's there?" Nothing answered, and the blanket froze again, shivering without wind. I circled the chair, watching the fabric curl and twist. Each fold seemed to hold a presence I couldn't see. A shadow passed beneath the curtain, fleeting, almost apologetic. The fire popped, sending a warm flicker across the floor. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then the blanket twitched toward me, edges trembling. As if inviting my hand, I touched it, cold. Not fabric cold, bone cold. The blanket shivered violently. then stilled, flattened against the chair. I pulled it close. Felt nothing. Yet a hum lingered faint and vibrating beneath my skin. I wrapped myself in it, shivering, trying to convince my body it was warmth. Outside, the forest sighed, settling into silence. Inside, the blanket remained heavy and alive, like it had carried something with it that did not belong to the night. I lay down, pulling the blanket over my shoulders. The room quieted. The chair stood empty. Yet, somewhere in the folds, the soft breathing never ceased. I closed my eyes, tried to imagine the forest instead of the chair, tried to forget the shifting fabric, the gentle inhale, the small impossible movements. Sleep edged toward me slowly. The blanket lay still now, though I knew it had only paused. And somewhere faintly, the air moved again, brushing against my cheek like a question without a face. I held the blanket tighter. A shadow lingered in the corner of my vision. I didn't move. I couldn't. The night outside folded into itself, endless and patient. And inside, the blanket rustled once more, a soft exhale, almost sighing. Not mine, and I let it be. The air was cold, though the sun had barely set. Mist clung to the lake like a fragile veil. I could see my breath curling. Small ghosts that disappeared as quickly as they formed. The path to the shore was narrow, flanked by reeds that bent under some unseen weight. Each step squelched in the mud, soft and hesitant. A low hum drifted across the water. At first I thought it was the wind, but the sound lingered, smooth and persistent, as if the lake itself was breathing. It wasn't mechanical, not human. I stopped. The hum wrapped around me, brushing my chest in vibrations I could feel, not just hear. My fingers tingled. My teeth felt hollow. The reeds whispered as I passed. Each blade seemed to hum with its own secret. I wanted to call out, but the sound pressed a finger against my lips. Closer to the water, the hum deepened. It pulsed, slow and patient, like a heartbeat from beneath the surface. The mist thickened. I could barely see the opposite shore, just a shadow, pale and trembling. Something shifted in the fog, a ripple almost deliberate stretching toward me. I took another step. The hum followed, swelling in resonance, vibrating my ribs, my skull, my spine. The smell of wet earth and decaying reeds rose sharply. It filled my nose. A shiver crawled down my neck. I wanted to turn back, but I couldn't. I wanted to touch the water, see where it came from. It called softly, hypnotically. The surface broke suddenly. A thin, dark form slid just beneath, unseen yet moving. Ripples spread outward in concentric circles, erasing the faint reflection of the sky. The hum stuttered, then grew, insistent, like it had found me. I knelt at the edge. The cold licked my hands, icy and alive. The vibrations dug into my chest. I pressed my palm against the water. It pulsed back, like answering some ancient rhythm I had forgotten. I couldn't pull away. My senses narrowed to the hum, the water, the fog. Shapes emerged in the mist. Not solid. Not fully there. They wavered, thin and trembling, stretching from the far shore. They weren't moving toward me. They were bending with the sound. The hum shifted tone. Higher now. Lighter. It tickled the edge of my skull like a whisper just beyond hearing. And then silence. I froze. The world seemed to pause. Even the reeds held their breath. Then the hum returned, low and insistent. Now beneath me, rising through the ground, filling my chest. My reflection in the water was wrong, pale, stretched. I blinked. It didn't blink back. Something brushed the nape of my neck, soft, almost a caress. I whirled, but there was nothing. Only the fog, curling, retreating slightly as though watching. I sat on the wet bank. The hum slowed, a deep purr, vibrating in sync with my heartbeat. I closed my eyes. It was not fear, not yet. It was curiosity, creeping, curling around my ribs like smoke. The lake shivered. A faint outline appeared, something hovering beneath the surface, just beyond seeing. I could sense it more than see it. It felt alive, waiting, patient. I tried to speak, whisper, call its name. My voice barely broke the hum. It was swallowed, folded into the vibrations, leaving only a shiver in my chest. The fog parted slightly. A thin, pale light drifted across the water, silver and liquid. It danced just above the ripples, and I realized it wasn't a light from the sun, nor from the moon. It was the lake itself, glowing faintly in response to the sound. I leaned closer. The water's surface was glassy now, calm, reflecting the sky in a distorted pale smear. The hum pressed against me, a soft insistence, coaxing, pulling. I felt my chest rise and fall with it, my pulse sinking to the unseen rhythm, and then I stopped. I didn't know if I wanted to hear it or not. The vibration slowed. The water stilled. Only a faint shiver remained in the air. I got up. The fog curled around my legs, whispering farewell or warning. The hum retreated, distant now, like a thought fading from memory. I didn't turn back. I didn't run. I walked slowly, letting the sound shrink behind me. And yet, when I finally reached the trees, I could still feel it in my chest, a faint, unplaceable vibration. And sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear it again, far away, waiting. The fire crackled in the pit, tiny sparks drifting like lost fireflies. Night had fallen thick and sudden, and the trees leaned close, their branches trembling in the dark. I sat on a log, the warmth licking my hands. But even here in the open, I felt eyes pressing against my back. Shadows stretched long and thin beyond the rim of the flames. At first they moved with the flicker, like the bending of branches in a soft wind. Then, slowly, they started to move differently, a sway too deliberate, a rhythm I couldn't hear. I watched a shadow detach from a nearby tree. It leaned, then twirled, its motion not quite like mine, not like anything alive, and for a moment I could have sworn it smiled. The logs hissed. A breeze carried a scent I didn't recognize, smoky, metallic, bitter, and it made my stomach twist. I told myself it was imagination, that the dark played tricks, but the shadows, they didn't care about logic. A shadow slid along the ground toward me, slow, purposeful. It didn't touch the dirt. It glided, whispering across the grass. I shifted my weight. The crackle of the fire seemed louder, like it was arguing with the silence around me. Something rustled behind a pile of logs. I froze. The flame's glow licked the bark of the nearest tree, and for a heartbeat, I saw another shape. A darker shadow inside the brighter one. It moved with independence. Not from the logs, not from the flames, but like it had a mind of its own. A sway, a step, a pause. I realized I wasn't breathing. The air tasted heavier now, as if it had soaked up all the quiet. Every small snap of a twig made my heart jump. Then, I saw more. Shadows peeling off the ground, curling around one another in shapes that made no sense. Limbs that stretched too long, faces that blurred when I blinked. I wanted to look away, but my eyes were glued to the firelight. Each shadow twisted and spun in a choreography I could not follow. A faint hum rose from somewhere near the tree line. Low, vibrating, insistent. It didn't belong to the fire. It didn't belong to me. I thought about moving closer to the flames, letting the light make sense of the shapes. But the shadows multiplied. Now they danced along my legs, slid up the logs, licked the air with a soft, curling hunger. My hands tingled. My skin prickled. It was like the dark itself breathed against me, light leaving patterns on my arms I couldn't name. I whispered a single word, and the shadows paused. Then they resumed, faster now, flashes of light and dark weaving impossible figures that flickered at the edges of my vision. The logs popped. A single spark rose like a tiny star, and in its brief glow I saw something. A figure crouched just beyond the circle of fire, head tilted, watching. It didn't move, yet I felt the gaze press through the smoke. Even my shadow cast on the ground, stretched and quivered, not matching my posture. I looked down. The fire reflected in the puddle nearby, and in it, shadows moved where there were none. A dance I could not join, a rhythm I could not hear. The hum continued, and I realized it was my heartbeat, echoing back at me, slightly off, slightly wrong. A log cracked. The sound was loud, sharp, and in the pause afterward, all motion stopped. The shadows froze mid-step, leaning, curling, twisting. They hung in the air, unblinking, waiting. I tried to rise, but my body felt heavy, not with weight, but with something unseen, anchoring me to the earth. The fire flickered once, twice. Then, a gentle rustle, like soft footsteps, circled the pit. I could feel it, not see it. Warm and cold at the same time, like breath sliding across my neck, the shadows began to shrink. They retreated into the trees, folded into themselves, leaving the firelight trembling on bare logs. The hum faded. My heartbeat slowed. And still the feeling lingered, the knowledge that eyes watched even when nothing remained. I stared into the fire, its warmth gentle now, its glow small. And somewhere deep in the dark, I knew the dance would begin again. The logs hissed, sparks drifting upward, and for a long while I simply sat. Alone with the shadows I could no longer see, but could never fully leave behind. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind felt hesitant, brushing the tops of the pine needles like it didn't want to disturb anything. I had been walking for hours, though the sun had barely moved. The path stretched ahead, soft underfoot, damp with fallen leaves. I could feel the chill in my fingers, creeping slowly up my arms. Every so often a bird would call, but it sounded wrong, too high, too sharp, like it had been stretched thin. I followed the trail. Or at least I thought I did. It curved gently to the right between two gnarled oaks. Their roots twisted over each other, creating shapes I almost recognized. My foot hit something soft, like moss, and then the earth gave way slightly. I paused. When I looked back, the path was gone. Not faded. Not covered in leaves. Gone, just the same trees. The same moss. Nothing that hinted I had been walking there at all. I stepped forward again. Another curve. Another turn. And each time I glanced behind me, the trail had vanished. The trees were tall, identical in bark and branch, as if some painter had copied and pasted the forest endlessly. I tried to mark my progress. A scratch on a tree, a small pile of stones, something to tell me I had been here. But when I looked back, it was as if I hadn't moved at all. A fog had begun to settle, thin and silvery, curling around my ankles. It smelled damp, earthy, faintly metallic. I could see the shapes of the oaks, but not the ground beneath them. My breath rose in front of me, uneven. I whispered to myself, trying to anchor reality. This is the trail. I am on the trail. The words felt hollow. Every now and then a twig snapped somewhere far away. I spun, expecting movement, but the fog swallowed it before I could see anything. My steps grew cautious. The trail, when I forced my gaze forward, seemed to bend back on itself. The same tree appeared again, its bark streaked with dark lines like veins, and I could have sworn it had been behind me a moment ago. I stopped. A rustling came from just beyond the fog. Not loud, not abrupt, but steady, deliberate. Leaves brushing against each other. My stomach sank, I called out. My voice felt weak, too small for the vastness of the woods. No answer. The fog thickened. Shadows pooled beneath the branches, soft and trembling. A cool wind brushed my neck, and I shivered. I tried to run, thinking maybe if I moved faster I could break the pattern. The forest resisted. Each step forward felt heavier. The same tree reappeared, closer than it should have been, and when I looked behind, still no path. A faint hum started, barely audible. Low, almost comforting. I followed it, thinking it might lead me out, but it was everywhere. Or nowhere. I couldn't tell which direction it came from. The branches brushed my face, leaving traces of moisture. I wiped them away. The hum grew quieter, then louder, then stopped altogether. I realized I hadn't seen the sky in what felt like hours. The light was pale, filtered through layers of fog, giving the world a washed-out glow. I began leaving small markers, stones, twigs arranged in arrows. But when I looked back moments later, they were gone. The forest didn't want to guide me. It wanted me to forget. I stumbled over roots, my hands scraping the bark, leaving faint streaks of blood. I paused to catch my breath. Something moved in the corner of my eye. A shadow, perhaps. Too fluid to be a deer. Too deliberate to be wind. I froze. The trail was gone. Again. I realized then I wasn't walking a path anymore. I was walking the same patch of earth over and over, the forest folding back on itself like a slowly closing door. a sigh, soft, like someone exhaling behind me. I turned, but no one was there. I started moving again, slowly, trying not to panic. Each tree felt alive. The bark looked like eyes staring, pale, wet eyes reflecting the dim light. I whispered nonsense to myself. My name, the date, the city I had come from. Anything to remind myself I was real. The rustling came again, closer this time, circling me. My heart thumped, soft but urgent. I stopped. Closed my eyes. Tried to listen to my own breath when I opened them. The forest had shifted. The path was faintly visible, snaking forward. Or maybe backward. I couldn't tell. I took a step, and the trail vanished behind me. I moved again. The hum returned. Soft, constant, enveloping. I could feel the cold pressing in, the fog curling tighter around my legs, higher with each step. And yet, a strange calm settled over me. I walked. The forest repeated itself endlessly. The trail, I realized, might never have existed at all, I whispered to the wind. But the wind only whispered back. The room was quiet. Outside, the fog curled along the pavement like slow smoke. I had left the window slightly open, but the air inside was still, stale even. I shivered. Not from the cold. It was the first time I noticed it. A tingle along the back of my neck. I froze. A soft, fleeting breath, colder than the air itself, grazed my skin. My pulse slowed, my chest tightening. Turning slowly, I scanned the corners of the room. Empty. Everything seemed untouched. The lamp flickered, faint and hesitant. Shadows danced on the walls, stretching thin and brittle. I thought I saw something there. A form. Pale. Fleeting. Dissolving with the light. The tingling returned, circling my neck like a whispering wind. I pressed my fingers there, trying to ground myself. Nothing, a creak, soft, from the hallway. I didn't move at first. My breath became shallow, each inhale sharper than the last. I told myself it was the house settling, the old boards groaning, but then the hum. Low, insistent under the floorboards, almost like breathing. I turned my head again. The window was still open. The curtains barely moved. Still, the sensation on my neck persisted, colder, heavier. I sat down, trying to convince myself to stay calm. Yet every shadow seemed closer, every corner darker than before. Something lingered just outside my vision, always there, never there. My eyes flicked to the hallway. A figure? A shape? A trick of the fog filtering through the cracked door? I couldn't tell. I swallowed. The room's quiet seemed too quiet. I could hear the faint scrape of shoes on wood, soft, deliberate. It was impossible. No one was home. I had been alone all night, and yet the cold breath traced my neck again. Sharper this time. Closer. I stood, heart hammering, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The lamp flickered again. And for a moment, the room was bathed in pale light. In that brief illumination, I thought I saw the outline of a face, pale and blurred, behind the doorway. I blinked. It was gone. A silence settled, thick and pressing. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of everything. Even the air felt heavier. I walked toward the door, each step measured, careful. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, shadowed and uncertain. A draft tickled my skin, moving like fingers along my spine. I stopped midway. The feeling of being watched sharpened. It was no longer subtle. Something was tracking me, patient, silent. I couldn't see it, but I felt it in every nerve, every breath. I turned slowly, almost expecting it to be right behind me. Nothing. The tingling spread to my shoulders. My skin prickled under the invisible touch. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the quiet. The fog outside thickened. The pale light dimmed further. And still the cold lingered, pressing, unyielding. I leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was the stress, the isolation, the quiet too heavy for my mind to bear. Maybe it was nothing, but the soft footsteps returned. Closer this time. Not across the floorboards, but inside the walls, behind them, echoing in my chest. I held my breath. The room seemed to shrink. Every shadow now held a shape, Every silence held a presence, a sudden rustle near the window. I turned slowly, cautiously. Nothing moved, yet the sensation, the cold, wrapped around my neck once more. I felt it linger long after I had turned away. And the eyes? I knew they were there. I sat down on the floor, pulling my knees close, trying to anchor myself. The air remained still. The room remained empty, but the tingling never left. Not entirely. A quiet reminder that even in the safest corners we are never truly alone. I exhaled, slowly. The fog pressed against the glass, pale and thick. I waited, and in that waiting, the cold brushed my neck again, just lightly enough to make me shiver. And then it was gone. Or at least I thought it was. The lake was still tonight. A thin layer of fog clung to the surface, pale and restless. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and something older. I stood at the edge, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud. A single reed trembled in the breeze, then stilled. The fog shifted. Not like the wind exactly, more deliberate. Shapes formed in the mist. At first I thought they were reflections, trees stretching, bending, but they moved with purpose. Humanoid, pale, almost translucent, they lingered near the water's edge, then drifted closer. Their outlines were soft, undulating, like smoke caught on the breeze. I wanted to blink, to shake the thought from my head, but I couldn't. A laugh. Faint, echoing. It didn't belong to the wind. It twisted around me, threading through the reeds, curling under my ribs. I stepped back. The mist followed, slow, as if the fog itself were breathing. Every step I took, it mirrored, shapes elongating, reaching, dissolving. The surface of the lake rippled, though the air was still. Shadows flickered under the fog. I thought I saw them smile, briefly, before melting into a vapor that rose like sighs. I crouched by the water, compelled. One figure lingered longer than the rest, swaying in a rhythm I didn't understand. It didn't move toward me. Not yet, I heard whispers. Soft, insistent, just at the edge of hearing. Words I couldn't place, but they felt familiar. A memory I had never had. The mist thickened. It wrapped around my ankles, cool, damp, whispering against my skin. I shivered. Not entirely from the cold, I dared to reach out. Fingers brushed the fog. It pulled back. A soft giggle, echoing, carried across the water. The shapes drifted, mingling, separating, then reforming into new forms I hadn't seen before. One looked like a child, one like someone I once knew, though I couldn't be sure. Each hovered, paused, then dissolved into nothing. I couldn't move my eyes from them. The fog seemed to breathe in response. It curled around the reeds, around the lake, a living thing. A sudden gust stirred the surface. Ripples became small waves. The shapes wavered and stretched, like reflections in a warped mirror. I felt a presence behind me. I didn't turn. The laughter came again, nearer this time. Not loud, but inside my skull, resonating. The mist pressed closer. It seeped between my fingers, dampening the sleeves of my coat. I wanted to run. My feet felt rooted. I saw movement at the tree line, something pale and flickering, glimpsed just before it dissolved. It left the faint scent of wet stone and smoke. A shadow detached itself from the fog. It hovered, then paused, waiting. I realized it wasn't the figure that was unnatural. It was me, standing here, frozen. Time slowed. Each breath was visible, misting in the night. I thought I heard footsteps echoing, soft and deliberate. But when I turned, nothing was there. The lake's surface shimmered unnaturally. I could see shapes beneath the water, reflections that didn't match the figures above. They twisted, reaching up toward the surface, as though the mist were alive in both air and water. I whispered something, my own name, unsure if I was asking or warning. The fog responded. A swirl of pale light coalesced before me, forming a face I almost recognized. The laughter faded. The shapes thinned, retreating back toward the water. They dissolved. The lake returned to stillness. A single reed quivered, then stilled. I was alone. But when I looked down at the surface, my reflection wavered. Something lingered just behind me, pale and soft, like mist that moves. And waits, the hall was empty. Only the faint hum of the radiator filled the corners. I hadn't noticed the mirror before. It leaned against the far wall, pale frame catching the dim light. I could see my reflection, or at least what looked like me. But the room behind me wasn't mine. Shadows stretched across the floor, brushing the edges of furniture I didn't own. A chair swayed slightly, though nothing had touched it. The air smelled faintly of cold wax and damp fabric. I stepped closer. My hand reached out, hovering over the glass. The reflection didn't mimic me perfectly. Something shifted behind me in the mirror. A shadow paused in the corner, pale and elongated. I froze. My breath was shallow. The ceiling light in the reflection flickered, then steadied. I noticed a door that shouldn't be there. It opened just enough for darkness to spill out. I blinked. The shadow moved toward it, slow, deliberate. A soft rustle followed like silk brushing skin. I wanted to look away. I wanted to run. But the mirror held me, quiet and commanding. The chair creaked again. In my reflection, I saw it tilt, rocking as though someone had settled into it. I heard nothing in the room around me. The mirror's surface rippled faintly. The walls inside it seemed to pulse, breathing. I imagined a heartbeat, soft and distant. A figure emerged behind my mirrored self. It didn't have a face, just a pale blur where features should be. It raised an arm, or maybe it didn't. The movement was wrong, like watching water flow uphill. I felt a cold tug in my chest. I whispered my own name. It came back to me through the mirror, echoing, slower, hollowed. The room in the glass breathed, and I could almost feel it press against my skin. Soft footsteps appeared in the reflection. No sound reached my ears. The air around me thickened, heavy, damp. I tried to step back. The mirror seemed farther away than the room allowed. The shadows inside it stretched, spilling like ink across the walls. A window in the mirrored room opened. A pale light fell over the floorboards, shifting and crawling. The figure paused, tilting its head toward me. I realized the reflection was changing. Furniture shifted, doors rearranged. The room inside wasn't fixed. It was alive and watching. A faint hum rose from the glass. It vibrated through the floor, through my bones. I could almost feel the pulse of that unknown space. Then nothing moved. The shadow had vanished. The room was empty, but the chill lingered. I leaned closer again. The mirror no longer reflected the hallway, only the room that shouldn't exist, a soft flicker. Something, or someone, traced the edge of my reflection. I could not tell if it was waiting or merely observing. I blinked. It lingered still. The air felt thick, silent, too quiet to breathe. I turned away. The mirror stayed. It waited in that same pale, humming quiet. Even now, when I pass the hall, I feel the tug at the edge of my vision. And sometimes I swear the glass breathes with me. The cabin smelled of damp pine and old smoke. Outside, the fog had rolled in thick, clinging to the trees like wet cloth. I was alone, or so I told myself. Every footstep I made on the wooden floor sounded hollow, but there was something else. A second step, faster, closer. I froze. The sound halted the instant I did. Not behind me, not in front, it was everywhere. I stepped again. 1, 2. The faster echo returned. It was too quick, too deliberate. The wind rattled the windows. A pale light spilled from the moon through the thin curtains, shifting in the cracks of the boards. And still, the footsteps. I moved toward the kitchen. Each creak of the floorboards matched the echo, but not perfectly. There was a hesitation in it, like it was watching, calculating. I leaned against the counter. My hands were cold, trembling. I listened to the hum of the fridge and the rhythm of my own breathing. And something else. Soft footsteps on the porch. I could feel them press against the boards. Then nothing. The silence was worse than the noise. It stretched out, thin and fragile. Every shadow seemed to twitch in the corners of my vision. I wanted to call out. My voice caught in my throat. I felt the echo of my own heartbeat in the quiet. I walked toward the hallway. Floorboards groaned under my weight. The second step followed. Faster, lighter. It didn't sound human. But it mimicked me perfectly. I stopped. The echo stopped too, but there was a lingering vibration in the air, like a whisper you almost hear but can't place. I could feel it breathing with me. The living room was empty. Shadows pooled beneath the furniture. I imagined movement just beyond my sight. I edged toward the stairs. Wooden slats shivered under my fingers. The faster step mirrored mine. I thought about turning back. But curiosity held me. It's easier to convince yourself of nothing when you can see nothing. The air grew colder. A draft swept through the cracked window. I felt a brush against my shoulder, soft, almost like a sigh. I froze again. The echo stepped once more, closer now, then stopped. I exhaled slowly. The sound of my breath seemed too loud. It lingered, hollow and fragile, between the walls. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking. The echo raced ahead, faster than it should, faster than I could. The hallway stretched before me. Paintings hung crookedly on the walls. I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I reached the first bedroom, door slightly ajar. The moonlight fell on the wooden floor. I stepped inside. The echo paused, then a small scraping sound, like nails on wood, right behind me. I spun. Nothing. The bedroom felt heavier now, air thick with anticipation. My own heartbeat was loud, erratic. I approached the window, pushed the curtain aside. The fog had thickened. Outside, shapes moved in the haze, brief, fleeting, impossible to name. I turned away. The echo stepped again. A single, deliberate step. It was patient now, waiting. I wanted to leave. But the door I had come through was wrong. Or maybe the hallway had shifted. The familiar path seemed unfamiliar, folded in on itself. I whispered a name. No reply. Only the echo of my own whisper returned, faster, sharper. I sat on the edge of the bed, tried to calm my hands. The floorboards groaned, the echo still pacing. Minutes passed like hours. I didn't dare look behind me. I only listened, a slow, steady scraping along the wall. I could not tell if it was wood or something else. It circled me without sound, except the echo that followed me still. I closed my eyes, imagined the steps fading, imagined the cabin as empty. I opened my eyes. The moonlight had shifted. Shadows stretched longer, thinner. The echo had stopped. But there was a lingering vibration, soft and expectant. It hummed beneath the floor, in the walls, in my own bones. I lay down on the bed. The fog outside pressed against the windows. The night held its breath with me, and sometimes I thought I heard a step. Just behind me. The air smelled of damp wood and river mud. Mist curled low over the water, swallowing the edges of the dock. My breath came in shallow whispers, fading almost as soon as it left me. I hadn't lit any lamps tonight. Yet, at the far end of the dock, a lantern glowed. Small, steady, pale as a reflection of the moon in shallow water. The boards creaked beneath my bare feet. Every step stretched the silence, pulled it taut around me. I thought I imagined the soft flicker, but it danced against the mist like something alive. Shadows moved beneath the lantern. Long, thin shapes that bent and flexed in impossible ways. Each time I blinked, they vanished, sinking into the dark water without a splash. A cold wind rose from the river. It rattled the railings, whispered across the empty pier. The lantern didn't sway. It stayed, patient and steady, watching. I stopped a few feet away. The wood hummed faintly under me, a vibration I couldn't place. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity pressed against my ribs like fingers. I reached out, thinking I could touch the lantern. My hand froze just short of the iron handle. The shadows beneath it twisted upward, into shapes that weren't human. Something shimmered in the water. A face? Maybe two. Maybe none. I couldn't tell if it was the mist, or the reflection, or if it was something watching from beneath. The air smelled different now, sharp like burnt paper and wet cloth. The mist thickened, curling around my legs like smoke from an unseen fire. I whispered to myself, soft, almost pleading. Nothing answered. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the dock and the faint creak of the boards under my weight. A movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow stretching along the edge of the lantern's light. It twisted toward me and then dissolved into nothing. The lantern seemed closer now. Or maybe I had moved closer without noticing. My senses felt unmoored, like I was floating above the dock, watching myself. I touched the lantern. Cold metal, heavier than it should have been. The flame didn't flicker. It just glowed, soft and almost expectant. A whisper rose from the water. Barely a sound. I leaned in, trying to catch it. The word, or maybe just a sound, made my skin crawl. The mist parted slightly. I could see my reflection, or someone else's, in the water. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent murmur. I tried to step back. The dock seemed longer now, endless, stretching into the black. Every board I crossed echoed louder than the last, though my feet barely made a sound. Shadows gathered at the edge. Not one, but many, pale and indistinct. They shifted as I watched, slipping under the dock and rising again in impossible ways. A sudden silence. No wind, no water, no hum. Just the lantern, glowing faint and steady, waiting. I tried to leave, but my legs felt heavier than the boards beneath them. Each step was slow, deliberate, like moving through water. The shadows leaned closer, brushing my ankles, tugging at the air around me. The mist swirled around the lantern now, wrapping the light in a veil of silver smoke. I thought I saw hands reach from it, long, thin, trembling. But when I blinked, it was gone. The glow softened, like the light was breathing. A quietness settled, almost gentle, as if nothing wanted to scare me. Yet the sense of being watched pressed against my back, a weight I could not shake. I let my fingers trail along the rail. The boards hummed under my touch, low and insistent. I wanted to speak, to ask what it wanted, but the words died in my throat. A ripple passed through the water. Reflections twisted into shapes I could not name. I blinked, and they were gone, leaving only the still glow of the lantern. I stepped back toward the shore. The dock stretched behind me, long and dark, endless in its quiet. The lantern remained at the far end, waiting, patient, luminous. I felt a shiver crawl along my spine. The river breathed softly beneath the mist, and I knew, somewhere between the water and the shadow, it was still there, watching. The air was thick tonight, thicker than it should be. Even the shadows seemed to weigh against the walls. I closed the window, but the room still felt open, endless. Every corner swallowed light before it reached the floor. I tried to focus on my breathing. Slow, deliberate, in, out. The rhythm was mine. At first, I thought it was just me, amplified by the silence. The house had a way of doing that, stretching the smallest sounds into echoes that filled the room. But then, there was another breath, soft, deep, punctuating mine. I froze. The sound wasn't hurried. It didn't stumble or waver. It matched mine, a shadow of rhythm I couldn't place. Like someone standing just behind the veil of darkness, moving with me. I didn't turn. Couldn't. My limbs refused, stiffened like they were part of the walls. The darkness pressed closer. It wasn't just around me. It was inside me, crawling under my skin. I could see the pale light from the hallway. It smeared across the floor, spilling into shapes my mind tried to name. Furniture bent. Corners stretched, a soft rustling. Something brushing against the edge of my vision. I blinked. Nothing. I tried to count my breaths. 1, 2, 3. But the other rhythm didn't falter. It stayed behind mine, patient. The air smelled cold. Not winter cold, but hollow cold. As if the darkness itself had lungs, I wanted to call out. My voice failed me. The sound caught somewhere between my chest and the ceiling. Soft footsteps, almost imperceptible, walking across a floor that hadn't been touched in hours. I wanted to look. The corners pulled at me. Every shadow had a shape now, waiting. My heartbeat stuttered. Or maybe it was just the other rhythm. Slow, deliberate, echoing mine. I told myself it was nothing. The house, the wind, an animal. But even my own logic sounded strange in that silence. A sudden hum filled the room. Low, steady, filling the empty spaces between walls and floorboards. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was patient, waiting for me to notice. I shivered. The breath behind mine grew stronger, more deliberate. Matching every shallow inhale I forced, I thought I saw a shadow move closer. Not mine. Long, stretching across the floor. It melted with the darkness, then vanished when I blinked. The hum rose a fraction. I could feel it in my chest, in the soles of my feet. It was breathing with me. I wanted light. I wanted a door. but the edges of the room twisted in the dim glow. Walls leaned, corners swallowed. I tried counting again. 1, 2. The rhythm behind me accelerated slightly. A subtle nudge, a proof that it existed. The air grew damp. Cold settled in my throat. Each inhale tasted like dust and fog, and something else. Metallic. I forced myself to turn. Slow, careful. Just a fraction. Nothing. Just the thick shadows. Yet the rhythm stayed. Soft. Deliberate. Closer than ever. The light flickered. I thought I saw a shape crouch in the corner. A whisper of movement. Then silence. I couldn't tell if it had moved toward me or away. The darkness refused to give its secrets. Only the breathing remained. Mine and the other. I pressed my hands against my ears, hoping the sound would fade. But the rhythm seeped through walls, through skin, through thought. The hum wrapped around me, not threatening, not loud, just present, a shadowed companion. I sank to the floor, hugged my knees. The darkness seemed to hug me back, patient, waiting. I could feel the other breath against my own. A ghostly mimicry, soft footsteps pacing in time with me. I stopped moving. So did it. An empty pause. The quiet almost comforting. I wanted to look up. The ceiling blurred in the dim light. Shadows pooled there like ink. And then I realized I could no longer tell which rhythm was mine, or if mine had ever been alone. The room settled around me. The hum faded slightly, but the other breathing remained. Not loud, not aggressive, just waiting. I closed my eyes. Let the darkness fold around me. The rhythm became a lullaby, or maybe it had always been. I drifted, half listening, half dreaming, and somewhere in the quiet, the other breath whispered just behind mine, and I could not tell where I ended, and it began. The air had a damp weight tonight. Mist rolled low over the clearing, curling around the old pine trunks. The cabin's wood groaned with the wind, or was it my own pulse? I stepped outside barefoot on cold moss. The forest was a quiet rhythm of rustling leaves. I told myself it was just the night settling. Then I heard it. Soft. A whisper that pulled the hairs on my neck straight. Aksa. It was my name. But the voice, it wasn't mine to recognize. It lingered at the edge of memory, familiar, and yet wrong. I turned slowly. The fog seemed to shiver. Branches brushed the air like pale fingers. No one was there. Just a shadow stretched thin between the trees. It trembled, almost like it was breathing. I moved toward it, careful, each step soft against the moss. The whisper came again. Maksa. Closer now, my stomach tightened. I wanted to run, but my feet stayed planted. The sound was warm, intimate. Impossible. The moon broke through the clouds. Silver light poured across the clearing. It illuminated nothing but empty trunks and drifting fog. I thought I saw a figure. It was tall, blurred, like water running over stone. Each time I blinked, it seemed to twist, just beyond focus. The whisper grew, but quieter too, a paradox of sound that made my chest ache. It was teasing me, mocking me with its near touch. I called out. My own voice sounded strange in the fog. Hello? Silence swallowed the reply. Then, static. A low hum from nowhere, brushing my ears. I stepped back toward the cabin. The door creaked open, though I'd closed it hours ago. Cold air spilled out like breath from another life. The whispers came from all directions now, a soft echo that made the trees bend closer. I felt the ground shift beneath me, though the earth was still. I froze. And then I heard it, my name, drawn out in a voice that mirrored mine. Not quite mine, not quite human. It called me gently, but there was an edge to it like ice under silk. The figure appeared again, this time closer. Its outline shimmered with the pale moonlight, but it was empty where eyes should have been. I wanted to look away, wanted to escape the pull of that voice, but curiosity or fear kept me rooted. Why are you here? I whispered. No reply, only a breath, and the shifting fog seemed to lean in. I stepped forward. The moss gave way under my toes, damp and hollow. I felt the figure's gaze, though it had no eyes, pressing into me. A sudden silence fell. The forest stopped breathing. Even the wind seemed to pause, then a soft rustle behind the cabin. I spun, Nothing, just a shadow curling against the boards. It wasn't moving. It was waiting. I swallowed. My own name came back to me in a whisper. From inside the cabin this time, I didn't enter. The door trembled with faint knocks, like fingers tracing letters I couldn't read. I listened, each heartbeat loud in the quiet. The fog thickened. It wrapped around the cabin like a blanket I didn't want. The voice followed, soft and insistent, echoing inside my skull. Axa? I wanted to respond, but I didn't. Fear had quieted my tongue. The night held me, steady and patient. I could feel the figure hovering just beyond sight, tethered to my own shadow. I wanted to reach for it, but my hands wouldn't move. Time stretched, thin as spider silk. Each whisper pulled me toward nothing. Each breath felt borrowed, fleeting. Then, nothing. No voice. No shadow. Just the wind moving through the pines, indifferent. I stayed there, listening to the emptiness. The fog whispered over the moss, brushing my ankles. The moonlight seemed to sigh, pale and distant. I know it is still out there, calling softly, waiting for me to answer. But I stayed. I stayed silent, and in the quiet, I could almost pretend I was alone. The fire was small, its amber glow barely reaching the edge of the clearing. The air smelled of wet pine and damp earth. Smoke rose in thin spirals, curling toward the dark sky. I watched it, alone, the quiet pressing against my ears. At first it was just smoke. Ordinary, drifting, harmless. But then the shapes began. A flicker of something familiar. A face, maybe, blurred and pale. I blinked. It was gone. I leaned closer, trying to see more. The smoke twisted, folding over itself. It became longer, thinner, like fingers stretching toward me. I shook my head. Just smoke, I whispered, though my voice felt too loud. The wind answered with a soft hum, shaking the trees. The shapes returned. This time a figure, small, crouched, its head too large for its body. It moved across the smoke, slow, deliberate, never touching the fire. I blew at it, softly at first, then harder. The smoke scattered, but only for a moment. It reformed, taller now, bending toward me as if curious. The flames flickered. Shadows leapt across my face. I felt the heat, but could not see the source. A face pressed close in the curling gray. I could almost make out eyes, deep and endless. It tilted its head, studying me in silence. I took a step back, letting the cold earth press into my hands. The figure shifted, now joined by another. And then another, emerging from the folds of smoke like memories I could not name. Their movements were wrong, too fluid, too smooth, like they were made of water. They whispered in the hum of the fire, a voice I could not place. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. I reached for the firewood, tossing another log on. The flames snapped and hissed, sending the shapes scattering. For a moment I thought I was safe, but the smoke returned, denser now, heavy and gray. It rolled toward me like slow waves. I tried to step aside, but it clung to my boots, rising in spirals around my ankles. Faces formed again. Old faces, young faces, faces I knew and should not have. They whispered in fragments I could almost hear, almost understand. I coughed. The air tasted of ash and iron. My fingers itched. My skin felt electric under the pale light. I reached to brush the smoke away, and it moved through my hand. One figure lingered closer than the rest. Its eyes were hollow, yet watching. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out, only a stretch of darkness inside. I exhaled sharply. The smoke recoiled, swirling higher. It climbed toward the branches, twisting around the leaves, dragging shadows with it. I could hear soft footsteps in the hum of the fire circling me. The wind picked up. The smoke followed. It formed shapes of animals I had never seen, yet recognized. Long-legged, spindly creatures that crouched and leapt over invisible rocks. I wanted to turn my back, to walk away into the dark forest. But the smoke shifted, blocking the path. It was alive in a way that made my chest tighten, my heart whisper warnings I could not speak. A sudden silence fell. The fire died down to embers, and the figures froze. I could see my reflection in the glossy black ash, and in it, faint shapes of the smoke hovered behind me. I whispered, almost pleading, "Go away." The smoke trembled, like water disturbed, but it did not vanish. It gathered into a dense cloud, twisting into forms too intricate to name. I knelt, shivering, trying to cover my face. The smoke brushed against my hair, cool, soft, impossibly delicate. It smelled of rain and something older. Old wood, old fear, old sorrow. Slowly, I dared to look up. The shapes had merged into one vast, shifting mass. It moved as if breathing, expanding and contracting with invisible lungs. I blew at it once more, and for a heartbeat, it wavered. Then it reformed, taller, stretching upward, stretching beyond what I could see. Its edges blurred into the dark sky, impossible to measure, impossible to name. I sank back onto the cold earth. The fire had dwindled to whispers. The shapes swirled gently, hovering, watching, never touching, yet everywhere. And I realized I did not need to move. They were patient. They would wait. I was alone with them, and yet not alone. The smoke trembled once, soft and subtle, like a sigh, and then it settled, curling quietly around the embers. I closed my eyes, feeling it hover, feeling it watch, feeling it remember me. I did not try to blow it away again. It would be here when I woke, and I would remember it, always. The mist lay heavy over the forest. Branches bowed under the weight of damp air. The scent of wet earth rose, sharp and alive. I thought I knew this place. I had walked these trails before, in sun and shadow. But tonight, it felt different. A faint path revealed itself, barely more than a suggestion. Soft indentations in the soil, blurred by fog. Someone, or something, had been here. I stepped cautiously. Each footfall was muted by moss and fallen leaves. The air grew colder, closer, almost pressing against my skin. The trees leaned inward, shadows stretching long and thin. I could hear them before I saw them. Small, careful rustlings. Leaves whispered secrets I couldn't understand. The path twisted suddenly. A gnarled root reached out like a crooked finger. I stumbled slightly, heart picking up a slow, insistent rhythm. Signs of recent passage were clear. A broken branch, splintered wood on the trail. Footprints, too large or too small, fading into mud. I paused. The forest had gone quiet, too quiet. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. A flicker of pale light danced between the trunks. Not sunlight, not moonlight. Something else. A shimmer. Like reflected glass hovering low, I followed it. The path narrowed. The hum of the mist became a soft pulse beneath my ears. Something shifted behind me, a movement in the fog. Slow, deliberate. I stopped, heart slowing, trying to listen. Silence. Then a faint crunch. Another step. The trail led to a small clearing. The fog pooled there, thick and still. A shape emerged, indistinct, crouched in the haze. I could not see it clearly, just angles, shadows, something crouched and watching. And the air vibrated with something I could not name. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity held me. A whisper on the edge of thought pulling me closer. I noticed marks on the trees. Scratches, shallow, deliberate, forming a pattern I almost recognized. Symbols or words, half erased by weather. The shape shifted. It rose slowly, taller than I expected. The fog wrapped it in a pale veil. I could feel breath where no one stood. Soft, uneven, brushing my cheeks like wind through leaves, and a hum beneath it, resonant, low and persistent. A small animal darted past my feet, not scared, not alive, just appearing and gone. The forest seemed to watch, waiting. I followed the shape unconsciously, through twisted undergrowth, deeper into the mist. The air grew thick, almost sweet, like decay mixed with rain. The trail ended abruptly. A hollow circular depression in the soil. No footprints beyond. Nothing but fog curling inward. The figure was gone. I blinked. Silence stretched, holding me, unyielding. I stepped closer to the depression. Cold seeped into my shoes, into my bones. I thought I saw movement below the fog, something pale and thin. A soft breeze carried something, like laughter or wind through broken glass. I could not tell, and when I looked again, it was gone. I turned to leave, heart quickening, footsteps careful. The forest seemed to shift with me, reshaping its paths. Mist pressed against my face, hiding all familiar markers. Behind me, I thought I heard the softest whisper. not a voice exactly. Not words. A name or a call trailing just beyond hearing. I kept walking, unsure if I was following the path or if it followed me. Branches scratched at my arms, low fog curling around my ankles. Every sense alert, yet dulled by unease. Eventually, the trees thinned. Pale light filtered through, diffused, unnatural, and the forest exhaled as though it had held its breath too long. I paused at the edge of the clearing. The mist receded slightly, leaving only traces of the hidden path. I knew it would not stay gone, not for long. I left the trail, but the feeling followed. That presence. Watching, patient, lingering, and when I closed my eyes at night, the path appears again, faint and beckoning, always just beyond the reach of understanding. The night pressed against the glass. Frost traced pale fingers along the edges of the window pane. I sat close, my breath fogging the cold surface. Outside, the forest lay still. Shadows pooled between the bare trunks. The wind had stopped, or maybe it had never come. A flicker caught my eye. Something moved behind the frost. A silhouette. Tall, still, watching. I blinked. Gone. My chest tightened. I told myself it was a trick of the ice, a shadow of a branch swaying somewhere beyond sight. But the ache in my stomach whispered otherwise. The window faced the forest, deep and silent. No path, no trail led close. Nothing should have been there. And yet I couldn't look away. Every few seconds, the shape returned. Just a shadow. Pale against the frosted glass, I heard a soft scrape. Something soft, brushing against the siding. I froze. The window pane beneath my hand was warm from my breath, yet the cold seeped from somewhere else. It moved again. Faster this time. A flicker of a shoulder, then nothing. I thought I saw it lean closer, as if peering in. My heart thumped, but my limbs were frozen. I tried to tell myself it was the tree's shadow, a trick of moonlight. But the forest doesn't bend like that. I could feel it waiting. Behind the glass, patient. The room around me seemed too quiet. I could hear my own pulse echoing. Ticking seconds like tiny footfalls in the dark. I drew closer. My fingertips hovered over the frost. Soft, jagged ice crystals cutting through the warmth of my skin. The shadow stretched, melting across the window, impossible angles twisting it. Then silence. No rustle, no hum, no shift, only the hush of night pressing against the walls. I told myself I imagined it, blinking rapidly, willing the cold glass to show only itself. The shadow was gone. I leaned back, but the feeling didn't leave. A presence lingering beyond the glass, watching, patient, quiet. I thought of the forest. How easy it would be to vanish in the trees, but no one had come close. Not a single footprint in the snow, not a crack in the frost. The wind sighed softly, a whisper curling through the room. The shadow didn't return, yet I could feel it bending the air, stretching the corners of the night toward me. I tried to sleep. The blankets couldn't reach the cold pressing against my spine. I turned, thinking the darkness would hide me. But in the corner of my eye, the window gleamed with a strange reflection. A silhouette, maybe just mine, lingering a second too long. A pause, a hesitation in the glass. Then the faintest movement, shifting like smoke, impossible to pin down. I held my breath. Even that seemed loud. Even that seemed too much, and when I exhaled, I saw it. A flash of a figure, pale, impossibly thin, just behind the frost. No face, no features. Just there. A question in its posture. A silent insistence that I shouldn't be here. I turned again. The room was empty. The forest remained still, each tree a sentinel in the dark. No footprints, no cracks, no sign anyone had approached. I don't know how long I watched. Minutes, hours, or perhaps only heartbeats stretched too long in the cold. The shadow never returned, and yet I feel it still. When I pass the window during the day, the frost is gone. The glass reflects only the sky. But at night, when the world folds into itself, I see it sometimes. A hesitation at the edge of vision. A shape, impossible to reach, waiting just beyond the warmth of my hands. Watching, always waiting. And sometimes, if the wind is just right, I swear it leans a little closer. The path was soft under my feet. Mist curled around the trees. It was early evening, the light pale and folding into itself. I came to the pond before I realized it. Its surface was flat. Perfectly still, I stopped at the edge. The air was cooler here. The hush around the water seemed to hold its breath. My reflection stared back. It smiled. I did not. A shiver traced my spine. I leaned closer. The pond didn't move. Then the corner of my eye caught something. A ripple, subtle, almost polite. It faded before I could pin it down. I thought the wind must have whispered across the trees. But the air was motionless. Every leaf hung frozen. I knelt. The water mirrored me exactly. The smile lingered. It did not belong to me. I tried to look away. But something inside me couldn't. The pond had a quiet insistence. I ran my hand through the surface. Cool liquid glass. For a moment, it felt like touching nothing. Then the ripple returned. From the center this time. Slow widening, the reflection shifted. My mouth moved, but I hadn't moved mine. The eyes were empty, pale. A single dragonfly landed on the edge of the pond. It hovered still, delicate. I could hear its wings, impossibly loud, against the silence. The smile grew, but I felt no lips stretch, no muscles contract. It existed outside me and inside me at once. I stepped back. My shoes sank slightly into the damp earth. The world smelled of wet leaves and something faintly metallic. A frog croaked. It echoed strangely, distant, as though under water. The pond's surface stayed calm. I tried to think of something ordinary, a memory, a song, but nothing sounded right. I watched my reflection tilt its head. I didn't. I realized I couldn't move. Not my limbs, not my voice. The ripple spread. It met the edges of the pond. Then the center rose, soft and slow. A pale, indistinct shape hovered just beneath the surface. I blinked. The shape vanished, but the smile remained. It lingered in my eyes when I looked away. I crouched. The water's surface caught the last light of the day. It fractured into something like glass, and then rejoined into liquid black. The silence was too deep, too patient. I could hear my own heartbeat in the pause. I touched the edge of the pond with my fingertips. Cold, like holding winter in my hand. The smile shifted, small, almost subtle, mocking. I whispered my own name. It echoed back, slightly wrong. The pond spoke without speaking, soft footsteps. I thought I had heard them behind me. Nothing moved. Only the ripple, returning, widening. I stood. The reflection tilted toward me now, slowly. I leaned back, but the pond seemed to lean forward, insistent. I tried to step away. The ground felt farther, stretching unnaturally. My feet were slow. The pond waited. I looked down. The water captured my fear. The smile. The quiet insistence. It didn't judge. It didn't need to. It only was. Night fell quickly, faster than it should. The fog thickened. I felt alone, yet not. A presence lingered in the shimmer of the surface. I wanted to turn my back. I tried. And then I saw the shadow. It moved just beneath the surface. Not quite human. Not quite anything. And yet unmistakably there. I froze. The pond didn't react. It let me watch. Let me decide how long to look. The dragonfly lifted, hovering again. Time bent, slow and quiet. Each second stretched too long. Finally, I tore my gaze away. The reflection returned to its still smile. I stumbled backward. The pond remained behind me, flawless, patient. I don't know how long I walked. The forest swallowed the fog. Shadows deepened. The pond did not follow, but its smile stays with me. Even in rooms where sunlight falls across the floor. Even in sleep when I close my eyes. And sometimes, in the quietest hours, I hear a ripple, soft, deliberate, and I wonder if it ever left me at all. The room smelled faintly of smoke. The fire crackled, small sparks drifting into the dark corners. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, soft and constant. I sank into the armchair, the one closest to the hearth. It was evening, but the sky had already turned a deep gray. Shadows stretched along the walls, thin and restless. Across from me, another chair waited. I hadn't noticed it before, yet it seemed familiar. Its wood was polished, smooth in the flickering firelight. I leaned back, feeling the heat warm my skin. The chair shifted. Just a little, I blinked. It hadn't moved, had it? But then a tiny scrape echoed across the floorboards. I stared. The chair had edged a few inches away. Alone in the room, the sound seemed impossibly loud. I reached for it. My fingers brushed nothing. The air was empty, thin, indifferent. A chill pressed against my spine. I pulled back my hand, slowly, as if it might vanish too. The chair rested just out of reach. The flames danced, throwing long fingers of light onto the ceiling. Each flicker made the chair appear closer. Then farther again. I whispered to myself, soft and unsure. "Is it moving?" The words felt wrong, like speaking could make it real. Silence grew thick. Even the fire seemed to hesitate. I could hear my own pulse, slow, uneven. The chair shifted again, this time deliberately, as though testing the edges of the room. I noticed the shadow it cast stretched unnaturally long. My hand twitched toward it once more. Through the empty space, I felt a brush of cold. Not from the air, but from somewhere else. I froze. The room was too quiet now. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. The chair had moved closer to the wall, not along the floorboards, but as if gliding on some unseen current. Its presence was heavier now, though it remained untouchable. I whispered a warning, though to whom I didn't know. "Stop." The word hung in the room like smoke. I shifted in my seat, the leather creaking beneath me. A faint hum resonated through the walls. Not electric, not mechanical, but soft, persistent. The chair's movement slowed, then paused. I couldn't tell if it waited or if I had just stopped noticing. The line between the two felt thin, fragile. I leaned forward, my cheek brushing the heat of the fire. Its light made the chair glow pale, almost unreal. Yet the emptiness between us remained tangible. I swallowed. A soft creak, like wood bending, whispered across the room. The chair had shifted again, a mere fraction, yet impossible to ignore. I felt my own breath, shallow and careful. The fire's warmth no longer reached the space where it had moved. It was colder now, as though some air had been stolen. I reached one last time. My fingers stretched and passed through it again. The air swallowed them as if I had never tried. I leaned back, retreating into the small warmth I had left. The chair remained, a quiet defiance in its impossible distance. Outside, the wind had stilled, leaving a gentle, uneasy hush. Inside, the room held its shadowy secret. And the chair waited. I did not move, not yet. And in that soft, suspended silence, I realized I might never sit across from it again. The house had been quiet for hours. Autumn wind rattled the bare branches against the windows. Every corner seemed darker than the last. I noticed first the hum in the walls, a faint vibration, almost like breathing. Then, suddenly, every light in the house winked out. Darkness pressed in from every wall. I could feel it, heavy and cold, settling across my shoulders. The only glow came from the corner of the hallway, a lantern, pale and flickering. It stood alone on the floor, the flames struggling against a draft I could not see. Its light trembled across the walls, stretching shadows like fingers. I moved toward it slowly. My own steps felt too loud, echoing far too long. The air smelled faintly of dust and burnt oil. Every shadow in the room seemed to lean toward me. They stretched across the floor and climbed the walls. I thought I saw one shift, a dark shape curling like smoke in the corner of my eye. The closer I got, the colder the hallway became. The lantern's light seemed weaker with each step, as if it were retreating. I paused. My breath caught. Soft whispers tickled the edges of hearing. I couldn't tell if it was words or just the wind. Something shifted behind me. I didn't dare look. Shadows started creeping along the floor, converging, crawling. They moved with intent, silent and deliberate. The light from the lantern quivered. It danced across something wet on the wall, something glistening, pale. I blinked and it was gone. Each step I took toward the lantern felt heavier. My legs were thick with fear, though I moved forward anyway. The silence pressed in between the whispers, thick and almost suffocating. I reached the edge of the hallway. The floorboards moaned under my weight, thin, fragile. The shadows paused, then surged. I could feel them circling. From the corners, from behind the closed doors, from the ceiling itself. Cold hands brushing the air around me, but I saw nothing. The lantern flickered violently, sending pale light in every direction. I could see glimpses of shapes that weren't there before. One had eyes, too many, blinking from the dark. I wanted to run. My body refused. My hands reached for the lantern. The flame flared once high and bright. In that instant, the shapes froze. Then the light dimmed again, leaving me in half shadows. Soft scratches ran along the walls, slow, deliberate. Something was learning my rhythm, mirroring my breath. I could feel it in my chest, small pulses of dread. The lantern's warmth was a lie. Its glow offered no comfort, only the illusion of safety. Still, I moved closer, drawn to it, compelled by the faint life it held. The shadows shifted as one. A wave, a tide of black against the faint light. I heard a soft rasp, as if they were speaking just for me. The floor creaked. I froze. The air pressed against my skin, thick and wet. I knelt by the lantern. Its light touched my fingers. And then I noticed, beneath the flame, beneath the brass casing, the shadows had gathered there too. They moved slowly, curling toward me, impossibly close. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. Only the faint hum in the walls answered me. Time seemed to slow. The flame in the lantern pulsed like a heartbeat. Every pulse revealed a new movement in the darkness, shapes leaning closer, stretching. I tried to lift the lantern. It was heavier than it should be, pulling at me, resisting. I could feel the shadows tugging, coiling around my wrists, my arms, my chest. The whispers grew softer, now more like breathing. Warm breath against my ear. And then silence. I dared a glance around. The hallway seemed endless now, darker than before and empty. But the lantern floated in my hands, its light unwavering. I stepped back, slowly, almost gliding. The shadows stayed just at the edge, curling, patient. Not attacking, just waiting. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old paper. I exhaled. The lantern's light caught the corner of something. A mirror, perhaps, or nothing at all. I didn't move closer. I didn't want to, yet I could not leave it behind. The room held its breath with me. And the lantern swayed slightly in my grip, casting long, slow shadows that did not belong to me. I sat there for hours, watching the darkness, listening to its soft rustle, and wondering if the shadows had always been there, or if I had just learned to see them. The fog had rolled in thicker than usual. It clung to the trees, to the damp earth like a living breath. I could barely see the path ahead. Each step sank softly into the wet grass. I thought I was alone. The quiet was too complete. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. A shape emerged. At first I thought it was a tree, a trick of branches in pale morning light. But it didn't sway. It didn't move with the breeze. It waited. A humanoid form, tall and still, in the densest part of the mist. Its edges blurred, shifting like smoke. I tried to speak. A greeting, a warning, anything. The words curled in my throat and vanished. I swallowed. The fog pressed closer. It smelled faintly of earth and something older, something colder. The figure didn't step forward. It didn't step back. It simply watched. I could feel its gaze, though there were no eyes. Just the sense of being observed, threaded through the fog. My heartbeat pulsed in my ears, loud and uneven. Soft footsteps, or maybe my own, echoed. I dared to blink. When I opened my eyes, the figure hadn't moved. I tried to count my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The fog muffled everything. Even the distant river sounded like a dull hum. A shiver ran down my spine. I realized the air had thickened around me, each inhalation pulling the chill deeper. The figure seemed lighter somehow, less dense, though closer than ever. I reached a hand forward. Nothing met my fingers. The mist swallowed it instantly, leaving only the cold. It tilted, almost imperceptibly. A shadow bending, shifting, but still not human. I wanted to step back. I didn't. My legs refused the command. A rustling came from the fog's edge. Leaves or something sliding across the earth? I couldn't tell. It leaned slightly forward. Not threatening, not welcoming, just attentive. I could hear the hum now. Not mechanical, not distant. It was in my chest, in my ears, vibrating under my skin. The figure's presence made it stronger, like it fed on silence. I whispered a name. No response. The fog absorbed my voice, turning it into a sigh I didn't recognize. A faint shimmer passed across its form. I blinked, thinking I imagined it. But it lingered, soft and pale, like moonlight caught in motionless water. I felt the pull of the mist. drawn toward it without moving. Drawn toward the quiet that pressed against my skull, the figure shifted again. This time, closer, almost brushing the tips of the surrounding branches. I could sense its shape, more defined for a heartbeat, shoulders, a head, the suggestion of limbs. Then it blurred, swallowed back into fog. I wanted to turn, to run, but the ground seemed to breathe beneath me, slowing my thoughts. A small sound. A sigh? A whisper? I couldn't tell. The fog devoured it before it reached my ears. I squinted. The figure reappeared now just at the edge of my vision. Every time I blinked, it danced at the periphery, refusing focus. I tried to move closer. Nothing happened. My feet felt heavy, anchored by the damp air itself. A pause. So long it became unbearable. The figure waited, and I waited with it. The hum inside me deepened. Or maybe it came from it. I could no longer tell which was mine, which was its presence in the fog. It tilted again, a slow gesture that wasn't a gesture. The world narrowed, the mist folding in around me. I could see nothing but its vague outline, a shape against the whiteness, alone but complete. I exhaled, a breath of air that felt borrowed from somewhere that wasn't mine. The figure didn't move. It didn't leave. It just existed, perfectly patient. A shiver passed, then faded. I realized I had stopped thinking in words. Only the fog, only the shape, only the quiet remained, and then slowly, imperceptibly, I understood. Some things wait not to harm, not to greet. They simply watch. I stepped back. The mist rose with me, folding and shifting. The figure stayed, at the heart of the fog. I didn't look back again, but I could feel it still. A presence just beyond sight, waiting patiently for me to forget the way home. And somewhere deep in the pale hum of fog, I thought I heard a soft echo of my own heartbeat, slowed, stretched, forever just a little behind my own. The lake was still, so quiet it almost felt like it had forgotten time. I stepped onto the muddy bank, each footfall soft, sinking slightly. The fire I had built the last time I came was gone. Nothing remained but pale ash, scattered like faint memories. Fog drifted across the water. It clung to the surface in slow curls, rising and falling without wind. I could not see the far shore. It was as if the lake had swallowed itself whole. I sat on the old rotting dock. The wood sighed under my weight, sending small tremors through the quiet night. All around the trees were still. Even the usual rustling of leaves seemed to have paused, waiting. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and something else I could not name. Something distant, like smoke from long-buried wood. I breathed it in slowly. It made my chest tighten. I watched the fog shift. A shadow lingered beneath it. It was long, horizontal, and it did not move like a fish. It stayed just below the surface, perfectly still, as if waiting for me to look away. I told myself it was nothing. Just a branch, a trick of the light. But the water's calm seemed deliberate, intentional. The dock creaked again, soft, subtle, like a warning whispered into my ear. I did not move. I could not move. The lake began to hum. A low, droning vibration, almost imperceptible. It came from beneath the water. I could feel it in my hands, pressed against the splintered wood. I leaned closer to the edge. The fog swirled, pale and thick, hiding something I could not name. It was darker than the night around it. A presence, or maybe just the lake itself, breathing. Soft footsteps, maybe my own, echoed in the stillness. Or maybe not. The silence after each step was heavier than the sound itself. I dared not lift my eyes from the water. Something shifted beneath the fog. A ripple, wide and slow, that should not have been there. The hum grew, vibrating in my teeth and chest. I felt my skin prickle, as if touched by something unseen. I closed my eyes. I told myself it would pass. But even when I opened them, the shadow remained. Patient, watching. A breeze rose, carrying the faint scent of fire, though the ashes were cold. It whispered through the trees, through the dock, through me. I shivered despite the calm air. Alone, yet not alone. I thought of leaving, but my body refused. It was rooted to the wood, to the hum, to the fog. A strange acceptance settled over me. The water began to pulse. Not waves, not ripples, but gentle, measured beats, as if the lake had a heartbeat. And I was listening, still, unable to leave. The shadow stretched closer, though it never broke the surface. I felt its gaze, or perhaps it was mine turned inward, reflecting fear onto the water. Time slowed. Breaths grew longer, shallower. I wondered if I had imagined it all. The hum, the shadow, the waiting. But the dock creaked again, softly, insistently. I knew then I had not imagined it. A fish jumped somewhere far off, breaking the illusion for a heartbeat. Then the lake resumed its silence. The fog rolled back over the disturbance, hiding it, smoothing it, erasing. Everything returned to calm. I sank lower onto the dock, knees drawn to my chest. The hum receded to a whisper. The shadow stayed beneath, patient, eternal. It did not move closer, yet it was always there. The night wrapped around me. The fog thickened, folding the dock into the water's quiet embrace. I listened to my own breathing, soft and slow, merging with the lake. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the faintest shimmer moved beneath the fog. Just a flicker, a pause, a hesitation. I stared until it vanished. I knew I would leave eventually. I knew the lake would remain. And I knew, somewhere under the calm surface, it was still waiting. I leaned back, letting the mist wash over me. Alone, yet not alone. And for the first time, I did not fight it. The water breathed. I breathed. And the night held us both, quietly together, in a silence I could almost touch.